A man walks alone through a sunny square. He carries a lit lantern in broad daylight. His eyes are wide, not from madness but from unbearable lucidity. He shouts to the indifferent crowd, "I seek God. I seek God." People laugh. Some mock. Others turn their faces away. He continues shouting, louder and louder, until his voice becomes a lament. God is dead, and we killed him. The scene freezes. The silence sways like lead. This is the most disturbing image Friedrich Nietzsche ever wrote, and you're about to understand why. Grab your whiskey as we delve deeper into the subject. God is dead, and you killed him without knowing it. Before we continue, if you enjoy delving into philosophical depths with a glass in hand and uncomfortable truths on the table, subscribe to the channel. It's not a request, it's an invitation. Whiskey isn't drunk alone. Now, tell me something. Have you ever felt like the world has lost its meaning? Did you know the rules of the game changed, but nobody told you? That everything that was solid, sacred, true, simply evaporated. Nietzsche felt it, and he shouted it in the face of all of Europe. Let's get straight to the point. In 1882, Nietzsche published the Gay Sciencein Aphorism 125. He describes this scene the madman in the marketplace. But pay attention, he is not just any madman. He's the crazy, the one who sees what no one else can see. He arrives in a busy square, broad daylight, sun at its zenith, and he carries a lit flashlight, as if searching for something in the darkness. The image is already absurd in itself, but it gets better. He starts shouting, "I'm looking for God. I'm looking for God." And the crowd, they laugh, they mock. Has God lost his way? One asks. Is he afraid of us? Another jokes. Or has he emigrated? A third quips. Because here's the crucial detail. These people don't believe in God. They are atheists, skeptics, enlightened beings. The marketplace is the symbol of secular modernity, commerce, reason, progress. God hasn't lived there for a long time. But the madman is not looking for God to these people. He is searching for God. In the man, you can't find it. Then, he's to peace. He looks at the crowd and drops the bombshell. God is dead. God remains dead. And we are the ones who killed him. Silence. He, continuis ichor diablo. How can we console ourselves? We murderers among murderers. What the world has ever possessed of the most sacred and most powerful has bled beneath our dagger sue will wash this blood from us. The crowd falls silent. But they don't understand. No, it achieves to understand. And the madman realizes he's too early. He arrived too soon. So he throws the lantern on the ground where it shatters and says, "I'm arriving too early. My time hasn't come yet. This enormous event is still on its way." And then he leaves. Take a deep breath for a moment. Did you understand what just happened? The madman isn't mad. He's the only sane one in the room. He sees the tragedy that the others still can't see. Those people in the square, they've stopped believing in God, but they continue living. As if God exists, they continue to use Christian morality. They continue to believe in absolute good and evil. They continue to seek meaning, truth, purpose, all sustained by a foundation that they themselves destroyed. They killed God. But they didn't realize that along with him, they killed everything he upheld. And the crazy guy, he's yelling in their faces, "You don't understand what you've done." Now tell me, do you laugh at the madman? Or do you end the madman? Because nothing is more human than killing God on a Sunday and going to work on Monday as if nothing happened. Now let's debunk the biggest misunderstanding about Nietzsche. God is dead is not atheism. It is not. Nietzsche is not celebrating, he is not engaging in anti-religious propaganda. He is not saying, phew, we finally got rid of this superstition. Quite the contrary. He is diagnosing a civilizational catastrophe, a collapse, an existential earthquake that has already happened but that no one has felt yet. Let me explain. When Nietzsche says God is dead, he's not talking about the existence or non-existence of a divine being in heaven. He's talking about God as the foundation upon which all of Western civilization was built over 2,000 years. Think about it. What sustained morality? God, what gave meaning to life? God. What separated right from wrong? God. What guaranteed that truth existed? God. What promised justice, order, purpose, reward, punishment? God. God was humanity's metaphysical GPS, the anchor, the north, the ground beneath our feet. And then suddenly, he died. Not because someone proved that he doesn't exist, but because we've stopped believing in him as the absolute foundation of reality. Science advanced. The Enlightenment rationalized everything. Secularization swept across Europe, and God was gradually pushed out of the center. But here's the problem. We did not replace him with anything solid. We removed the foundation of the house and continued living in it, thinking everything was fine, thinking the house would continue standing on its own. Spoiler alert, it won't happen. Because look at the difference. Not believing in God is simply not going to church. It's believing that religion is a thing of the past. It's living your life without thinking about heaven, hell, or sin. Peaceful? Many people live like that. But living in a world where God is dead thought s, something else entirely, that's waking up and realizing that you no longer exist. No absolute truth, no universal morality, no inherent meaning to existence. No guarantee that doing good ultimately means anything. It's like looking into the abyss and realizing there is no ground. You know exactly how this works? We grow up hearing that there is right and wrong. That lying is wrong. That killing is wrong. That being selfish is wrong. And we accept this as if it were ... obvious as if it were a law of nature, but it isn't. These rules were invented, constructed, upheld by millennia of Christianity that said, this is wrong because God said it's wrong. And even those who no longer believed in God continued to use this morality because it was comfortable, because it worked, because nobody knew how to live any other way. Until Nietzsche came along and said, wait, do you realize that this moral only made sense with God, right? Without him, what are you relying on? Awkward silence. Here's a modern analogy for you. Imagine that your whole life you used your cell phone's GPS to go everywhere. You didn't even memorize the routes anymore. You just followed the instructions of the robotic voice. It worked perfectly. Until one day you look at your phone and discover the GPS was always turned off. You were never following a real map. You were just walking, and by coincidence, you ended up in some places, but you never really knew where its hell was going. Or we? God is dead. And now you're in the middle of a road with no GPS, no map, no signs, no destination. And the worst part, you still pretend you know where you're going. You eschew say that's wrong, but why? Because God said so. You don't believe in him anymore, because society said so. And who told society? Because you feels what is wrong. And where do your feelings come from? From centuries of Christian conditioning that you inherited without realizing it. Nietzsche is saying, you're living on borrowed money, using money that's no longer yours, repeating answers from a test that's already been graded and failed. And of course, like all good tragedies, nobody wants to admit it. Because admitting that God is dead is admitting that you'll have to rebuild everything from scratch, alone, without a manual, without guarantees. It's admitting that perhaps there is no right or wrong, only choices and consequences. And this is terrifying. So we pretend, we go to mass on Sunday, we post motivational quotes about kindness, we complain about corrupt politicians as if corruption were an objective concept and not a moral invention. God's dead, but you continue praying to him in despair, hoping that no one will notice that you no longer believe in prayer. Think about it. Here's the question nobody wants to answer. If God is dead, who killed him? Nietzsche has the answer. And it's disturbing. It was us. It wasn't a militant atheist. It wasn't an evil scientist. It wasn't the devil. It was us. Western civilization. Enlightened Europe. Men of progress, reason, and science. We killed God unintentionally, without realizing it. And even worse, thinking we were doing the right thing. Let me tell you how this happened. Let's go back a few centuries, medieval Europe. God is at the center of absolutely everything the church commands. The Bible explains God created the world, governs the world, judges the world. Everything has a divine purpose. Even the Black Death is God's will. But then comes the Renaissance. Humanism, modern science, and something changes. Humans begin to look at the world and ask, what if we could figure this out on our own? Copernicus says, the earth is not the center of the universe. Galileo confirms the earth revolves around the sun. Newton discovers the universe follows predictable mathematical laws. Darwin concludes life evolved by natural selection, not by divine design. Every scientific discovery is a stab in the heart of God. Not because science was God, but why her? You don't need him to explain anything anymore. Want to know why it rains? Meteorology. Why did you get sick? Bacteria. Why is there life on Earth? Evolution. Why does the sun rise every day? Physics. God is being pushed aside further and further away until he becomes an unnecessary hypothesis. And the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was the Copte Gracie. Kant, Voltaire, Rousseau, all saying human reason is sufficient. We don't need divine revelation. We don't need dogmas. We can think for ourselves. And all of Europe applauded. Progress, freedom, rationality, but nobody stopped to ask. And now, if God no longer explains anything, what does? Nietzsche understood the problem. 19th century Europe was full of churches, but empty of faith. People went to services out of habit. They baptized their children out of tradition. They married in church for social convenience. But nobody really believed more that God was watching, that he would punish sinners, that he would give meaning to life. God had become just a decoration. And Nietzsche looked at that and said, stop pretending you killed him. Now have the courage to admit it. Because look at the hypocrisy. The same Europe that exalted reason, science, progress, continued to use Christian morality. It continued to preach humility, piety, charity, love for one's neighbor. Why? Because it was comfortable. Because replacing God is hard work. It's frightening. It's easier to keep up appearances, to go to Mass on Sunday, to swear on the Bible in courts, to teach the children to be good. But good according to whom? According to God. You don't believe in him anymore. According to reason, reason doesn't say you must be good. Reason is neutral. Reason gives you tools, not values. According to society, and who constructed the values of society, the Christianity that you have just killed. You go to Mass on Sunday and complain on Instagram on Monday, God is dead, but nobody had the courage to go to the funeral. And here's the point. Nietzsche is not celebrating the death of God. He is reporting cowardice of someone who killed and pretended not to have killed. He's saying, you destroyed the foundation of everything. And now, are you going to continue living as if nothing happened? They will continue to talk about human rights as if they were sacred, but sacred. Why? Who said humans have rights? God? You killed him. They will continue to talk about dignity and justice as if they were universal truths, but according to whom? According to what absolute criterion? There's no longer an absolute criterion. You killed the only one that existed. And the most ironic thing, science, progress, reason, all that we use to kill God, offers no alternative. Science tells you how things work. It doesn't tell you because you must live. It doesn't tell you what's right. It doesn't give you meaning. Reason gives you logic. It doesn't give you purpose. Progress gives you technology. It doesn't tell you what to use that technology for. We killed God with the tools of the Enlightenment, and we discovered, too late, that these tools, they do not replace what has been destroyed. Because nothing says spiritual evolution like nonsense on Twitter about who is more morally superior, while we all live in an ethical vacuum that nobody knows how to fill. Nietzsche saw this in 1882, and he screamed. Nobody listened. They were too busy celebrating the progress. Now we've arrived at the painful part. The part Nietzsche feared most. The part that explains why he called that man mad, because only a madman would dare to look at this head on. Nihilism. And before you think, oh, nihilism, that emo teenager thing where nothing matters, stop, breathe. Because Nietzsche's nihilism is much worse than that. Nihilism comes from no, and it means exactly what it sounds like. Nothing has value, nothing makes sense, nothing has any foundation, not because you're sad, not because you're pessimistic, but because the foundation of all values has crumbled. Ga, die, and with him everything he upheld died. Good, evil, truth, justice, purpose, meaning. All of this was guaranteed by God. All of this depended on him to exist as absolute truth without God. There is no such thing as an absolute anymore. So tell me, why shouldn't you kill? Because it's wrong. Wrong according to whom? According to morality. And where does morality come from? From God. Do you believe in him? No. Then why shouldn't you kill? Silence. Dostoevsky summed it up in one sentence. If God does not exist, everything is permitted. Nietzsche read this and thought, exactly. And that's terrifying, isn't it? Because if everything is permitted, if there is no objective right or wrong, if there is no moral truth outside of our own minds, why on earth should we be good? There is no answer. Not without God. And that is the vertigo of nihilism. You look down and see no ground, only abyss. And here's the danger that Nietzsche saw. When people realize that there is no foundation, two things can happen. Option one, total despair, passive nihilism. Nothing matters, so why try? Existential depression, apathy, paralysis. You give up on everything because everything is empty anyway. Option two, create new idols. Nihilism in disguise. You can't stand the emptiness, so you invent something to worship in place of God. The state, science, money, fame, progress, revolution, the nation, and you treat these idols as if they were sacred, absolute, as if they were the answer. But they aren't. They're just ... substitutes, crutches, patches, and Nietzsche knew these idols will crumble too, because they are not real foundations. They are desperate attempts to avoid looking into the abyss. You experience this every day. Look around. Where do people run to when they lose their purpose? Instagram, likes, validation, consumption, work, gym, diet, productivity. Everything becomes religion. Everything becomes absolutely necessary to be successful, necessary to be healthy, necessary to relevant. Single, according to whom? Based on what? God is dead. These values are not divine commandments. They are merely choices, fads, collective inventions that everyone accepted without question. And when do you realize that? The ground disappears. Nietzsche warns you, either you create your own values or you live under the values of those who had the courage to create theirs. Because nihilism is not a phase. It's not an individual problem. It is the condition of the modern world. God is dead and we are wandering in the dark, holding unlit lanterns, pretending that we can see the way. And that explains so much the epidemic of anxiety, the feeling of emptiness, the desperate search for meaning everywhere, horoscopes, quantum coaching, life purpose, courses. It's all an attempt to fill the void that God left. But Nietzsche doesn't accept patchwork solutions. He forces you to look at the whole, and he says, that's the price of freedom. That's the burden of living without a safety net. You killed God, now face the consequences. So, Eddie, we are at the bottom of the abyss. God is dead. Nihilism is knocking at the door. Everything has crumbled. And now, Nietzsche doesn't let you run away. He doesn't offer cheap consolation. He doesn't say everything will be all right. He doesn't promise it will be easy. He offers something far more radical, the task of creating oneself from scratch. And this has a name, Superman the Overman, the one who surpasses. He's not a superhero. He's not a demigod. He's simply someone who had the courage to look into the abyss, accept that God is dead, and say, that's fine. I create my own values, because that's the only way out. You can't go back to God. You can't pretend he's still alive. You can't cling to fragile idols hoping they'll save you. The only option, transvaluation of all values, rewrite morality from scratch, question everything you've been taught. Ask yourself, do I really believe this? Or did I just inherit it without questioning? And here's the hardest part, create your own answers. Not based on God, not based on tradition, not based on what everyone thinks is right, but based on you, on your strength, on your will to affirm life even without guarantees. This is the Übermensch, the one who bears the weight of total freedom. And why is this so difficult? Because most people can't handle it. They prefer to obey. They prefer to follow. They prefer to have someone telling them what is right and wrong. Because creating values is terrifying. It's about taking full responsibility. It's about living without excuses. Without God willed it so. Without society forced me. Without I had no choice. You had it. You always had it. But it's easier to pretend you didn't. Nietzsche shakes you and shouts, "Stop hiding. God is dead. Now you are free." And what are you going to do with this freedom? Most people, they panic. They look for another leader, another dogma, another ready-made answer. But he dances on the edge of the abyss. He says yes to life, even knowing that there is no guaranteed meaning, even knowing that he might be wrong, even knowing that he will die and perhaps none of this will matter. That's just how he lives, because he chose to. And that is the only true freedom, the only dignity that remained after the death of God. You might find this liberating or terrifying. Probably both, because Nietzsche isn't offering comfort. He's offering truth. And that truth is this: God is dead. And do you have the courage to live in a world without easy answers? Take a deep breath. Look around. You live in a world where God died more than a century ago, but no one has had the courage to fully admit it. You still use the morality he left behind. You still search for meaning as if someone had put it there. You still expect justice as if the universe cared. And Nietzsche, he continues to shout from the past. Agree, God is dead. And you have two choices. Live like a moral zombie, repeating values that aren't yours, or have the insane courage to create your own. Which one do you choose? Empty whiskey. Fill your glass. The next abyss awaits you. Subscribe to the channel